Hello, friends. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas from Sabil, from Jerusalem. It's nice. I see new faces here, old faces that we haven't seen for some time. I hope everyone is doing well. Everyone is healthy. You must be the most dedicated friends of Sabil. So, like, you're coming at a time just between Christmas and New Year. You're like, you're the commitment. You're the justice workers. So everybody is muted, as it has been the tradition. I just want to remind you that this meeting is being recorded because we have it on YouTube later on for people who were not able to attend, so that they can view it. But it's also being broadcasted live on the Kumi Facebook page. So if you'd like to share it or to connect it with people who are used to following it on social media, please do. Today, it is actually the first time since Kumi sessions started, if I'm not mistaken, actually Ryan confirmed it, is that Speaker and myself are in the office. We're in different rooms because we don't like each other, but it's because it's avoid the echoing. Xavier, can you hear me? Let's try the sound.
Is it okay?
Perfect. So I've been in Jerusalem, doing some visiting some people and taking care of business. So it's a pleasure to have you, Javier. Merry Christmas, Javier.
Thank you. Merry Christmas, and Merry Christmas for everyone here. As Omar said before, you are showing all your commitment by being here in a week that some people would be doing something else. So Merry Christmas from Palestine, where everything started. And hopefully we're going to have this last webinar Kumi session of the year, being able to answer all your questions and perhaps talk a bit more about this subject that I think it's very close to all of your hearts, which is the situation, history, and background of the first Christian community on earth, the Palestinian Christian community.
Thank you, Javier. Not everything started here, but the most important or interesting things from Jerusalem. I mean, we're always on the news. I don't know for how long, but that's part of the reality. I just want to say Merry Christmas to everyone. I hope, especially our friends who are in the US. I mean, it's the weather storm. We heard many lives were lost. We hold you in our prayers, but also all of our friends from different parts of the world, or time zones that work with us, that work well for the meeting to take place. So Javier, I just wanted to keep the tradition going, although that's the last session, and we can break the tradition. But I'd like you to introduce yourself to the group. That is always has been the tradition.
Okay. I think the most important here would be to say that I'm a member of the Sabil General Assembly, but I was born in Chile to family. My parents' family comes from Bejala, Palestine, very close to our hearts always. And there was a moment where I decided to return back home, take the challenge, and try to contribute to freeing our country. It's been a while since then. And by writing this book that we're presenting now, what I tried to do was to give some justice to a number of people, Palestinian Christians, that have enormously contributed to our national liberation movement, and that sometimes are not well remembered in terms of their presence in history books and others. So that's somehow, I think, what would be more interesting about me for you. But if you have any follow-up questions, I'm here to answer.
I mean, Javier was when for maybe like a few decades, when I was working with the young people at Sabil, used to come as part of the young adults group. We made many couples. We failed to make Javier a couple. We haven't found or a partner. But maybe it's on our to-do list as Sabil. So Javier, I just want to say that that's your first book that you have written.
It's my first book. I don't know if there will be a second one. Well, hopefully, there will be one. I'm already working on something based on this book. But I think most importantly, this book is an opportunity to bring some awareness about Palestinian Christians in general. I think it's been, I mean, it's been one of the most strategic aspects on Israel's propaganda, either to separate the Christian component of the Palestinian people from the rest of the Palestinian people. Unfortunately, there are some foreign churches and foreign heads of churches that try to portray Christians in Palestine as something weird between Jews and Muslims, but not necessarily as what we are, which is we are an integral part of the Palestinian people. And from that perspective, I think this book, or the main motivation behind it, once again, was to present a reality that perhaps for those who are here, tonight, our time is it's part of our lives, but for so many people outside, it's not really something they really know about.
I mean, there's so many questions that I want to ask you, and we're going to have it like a podcast, back and forth, some questions, and we're going to encourage people to ask questions in the chat. But the first, you don't cover the whole history. I mean, it is you cover only from a certain date to a certain date. Why did you choose the beginning and the ending dates as you did in the book? I think it's 1917 and
2004.
Yeah.
1917, I think it's clear. It's a Balfour Declaration, and it's basically the turning point where most nations in our region, they keep moving for national independence. As for in our case, the United Kingdom decided to gift our country to a movement that wasn't even here. Why to end in 2004? It was a complicated decision, but I think 2004, it's when one of the most important chapters of our history ends with the death of President Yasser Arafat. And President Yasser Arafat had a very close comrade called Father Ibrahim Ayad, who attended his funeral in Ramallah on November 13, 2004. But he was very old at that time. He got a cold, and 2 months later, after the funeral, he passed away after having lived almost all his life in exile and returning to Palestine only when President Arafat returned. So I thought that date was particularly meaningful, and that's why I decided to end the book in 2004.
But I mean, it is the contribution of Palestinian Christians continues. I mean, after 2004, and I hope until forever. And definitely our contribution goes before. But I mean, just wanted to clarify on the dates selection. So, Javier, I mean, it's a very big, when you mention names and you write about a specific period, you chose to speak about Palestinian Christians because it's not many Palestinian Christians contributed, and you wanted to highlight the people who have contributed, or some Palestinian Christians contributed in an amazing and remarkable ways that you want to highlight. What was the reason?
I think there are just so many questions. For example, when it comes to Sabil, the organization we are meeting here, it did not come out in a vacuum, and I'm really honored that actually people that I learn from every time I talk to, like Reverend Naim Atiq, Sidar Daebe, Sami Yahoud, I can see here some of them are all here, and by the way, I think they are much more interested to hear from them to listen from me. But it was very important, I think, to explain those processes that have been happening. I mean, it's true that from my own professional background, I focus a lot on diplomacy when it comes to the book. And that's something I explain in the introduction. I say that perhaps because of my focus on diplomacy, there are other aspects that were not really covered. But for example, Omar, even being someone who myself who have been involved in our Palestinian Christian community and the Palestinian people in general, there were several names that I did not know about at the moment that I started doing this research. And some of them I'm actually trying to follow up with just to understand what happened to them and their background. We have a number of clergy that were either in prison, exiled. People don't really talk about this. We have a number of people, Christians, at a moment that some in the West are talking about Christian immigration from Palestine. Well, it is impossible to understand the current reality of Palestinian Christians without understanding the Nakba, for example, and what happens when more than 50% of Palestinian Christians are actually expelled. They become refugees. I spent last week in Jordan, for example. I went to a church built in 1949. And if you start looking at churches all over Jordan, but particularly if you talk about Amman, for example, so many of those churches and institutions are built in 1948, 1949, 1950. They basically follow their faithful that were expelled from Palestine and became refugees in Jordan. A similar situation we have in Lebanon. Where until now we have Palestinian Christian refugees in Al-Bayr refugee camp, but we also have so many other people that tremendously contributed to Lebanon as well. And very few people actually have written about this, Palestinians in general, but also Palestinian Christians in particular. So that's part of the dots that this book has been trying to put together.
Javier, during collecting the period you were collecting the information, I know because it's multiple times I've met you and you've always mentioned that you were working on gathering the information for this book. What was the easiest? Was it easy to collect the information? Was it difficult? Did you rely mainly on interviews or on literature reviews?
I think I have to make a disclaimer here. Right, and perhaps I should have said this when you asked me to introduce myself. I've been working as an advisor for the Palestinian negotiations team for the past 12 years or so. So with that background, I've been able to meet with a lot of those people that actually made history, and I was honored to interview many of them. The second disclaimer is that for the past almost 4 years, I was not allowed even to exit Ramallah because of Israeli policies, particularly with regards to their control over our population registry. Meaning that I spent a lot of time going around Ramallah, interviewing people, because it was not an option just to give up. So I said, well, they want to lock me here. They don't let me get out of Ramallah. So let's get out of Ramallah with a book. And that's also part of the motivation I had when writing. Now, when it comes to collecting information, it's not always easy. Some churches, they would not open their archives. But I also found so many people willing to share their stories. So many people that were really committed, not just with, I mean, the book is just a detail, but with continuing and perpetuating, as you mentioned before, Omar, our role as Palestinian Christians in the Palestinian national movement. So from that perspective, I think I would like to think that the book brought some justice. But still, there are just so many things that were not included in the book. There are just so many stories that were not mentioned. I just tried to present perhaps a brief so people get an idea on how organic the Palestinian Christian presence is, not just as Palestinians in general, but as members of the national movement and the national liberation movement in particular.
I mean, it is. I mean, the involvement of Palestine. I mean, the struggle of the Palestinian people is very diverse. Some of it is cultural, some of it is economical, some of it is social, some of it is even in militarism. Why did you, like, how did you divide the categories when you were doing the research, and whom did you include and whom did you eliminate?
Yeah, that's actually a very good question. I said that I basically focused on Palestine's diplomatic history. So from then it was much easier to identify which players were actually more relevant for that research. So the categories are not with regards to the different organizations, but it's mainly about the historical periods. So we start with the period of the British Mandate. Then we go for the consequence of the Nakba and what happens in the region, not just in Palestine after the Nakba of 1948. Then we go into the Israeli occupation of 67. Afterwards, the 80s, which is a very important decade, and it's like moving towards a peace process. And at the end, we conclude with the Second Intifada. Under this, you find just so many elements. For example, in I think the third chapter, I could not really explain the moment of the Jordanian control over the West Bank without talking about tourism, about the importance of pilgrimage, about so many hotels that were opened, particularly in Jerusalem, how developed our touristic sector was for pilgrimage, but most importantly, what kind of pilgrimage? Most pilgrims were actually Arabs. We had people coming from Jordan, we had people coming from Iraq, we had people coming from Syria, from Lebanon. We had an airport that today some people refer to as a Kalandia checkpoint, but there was an airport there, the Jerusalem airport. We used to have daily flights to Cairo, to Beirut, to Damascus. They used to bring people here. This connection, it's kind of forgotten. I will get back to the point I made before. You know, I could not really enjoy this Christmas, Omar, even though I was in Bethlehem, even though I was in the church. I could not really enjoy this Christmas thinking about so many people, and I'll be selfish now, so many Palestinians, sisters and brothers, that were denied their right to be in Bethlehem with us that night. And those are things that usually people don't really talk about. But when you talk about over 100,000 Palestinian Christians in Jordan that have to wait for every Christmas for I don't know how many permits, 100, 150 permits for them to be able to come to Palestine. When you are talking about the Palestinian Christians in Lebanon, I'm not even talking about the US, I'm not even talking about Canada, I'm not even talking about Latin America. Let's focus on our region. You know, isn't the West so concerned about the future of Christians in our region? Why aren't they concerned about them not being able to do what their relatives were doing for generations, which is to do pilgrimage where they should be, which is Jerusalem, which is Bethlehem, of course, as well, Nazareth. So all together, I think the book serves as a reminder of all those elements, even though I did not go into so many details as I would have liked to. I mean, the book I think has like 350 pages. It's like 500 citations. So I did not also want to get into much more details on this.
I have to admit, there's a number of people actually who have attended your book launch, your number of book launches. One, I think, was the first one in Birzeit, and one in Jerusalem. Did you hold any other book launches?
No, actually, I created a family crisis because I made the first launching in Birzeit in the Episcopal Church. So the first question I got was, why not Bejala and why an Episcopal church and not an Orthodox one? The second one was Jerusalem, but for obvious reasons, no one could say anything. And I'm still missing the Bejala one. I think I should do it out of respect for my family that were not very happy with my first choice. Let's put it this way.
So let me join the hundreds of angry people in Beit Jala. Why did you choose Birzeit out of so many different places to hold the first book launch?
It would take me a lot of time to tell you my connection with Birzeit. But the Episcopal Church in Birzeit is a place I feel very close to my heart. I go to pray there every Sunday now on winter time, 5:30 p.m. We may be 7, 8, if we are lucky, 9 or 10 people praying. It's not because people don't want to pray. It's basically because we have a problem that our people are not allowed to return here. And that church is a church that hosted so many important people. It was the first church for Bishop Elia Khoury, who 15 years later, after 1954, when he was when he became the Reverend of Birzeit, he was expelled, deported by the Israeli occupation to Jordan, where he became bishop. But before he played a fantastic role at that church and at the Birzeit College. It was a church where our martyr, the late Kamal Nasser, used to play the organ. Kamal Nasser used to be a member of the PLO Executive Committee. He was a member of the Jordanian Parliament before being deported by the Israeli occupation. And very few people actually know that he used to play the organ at church. So I wanted to bring some memories of those people. And that's why, if you notice on that launching, we set a table with 4 chairs. Actually, we were just 3 speakers, but I decided to place the picture of Kamal Nasser to my right. So we keep remembering what he did, his legacy before he was brutally assassinated by Israeli commandos in Beirut in 1973.
We're getting many questions on the chat, and I'm also getting them on person. People are interested also with the connections of Latin America and Palestine. So, how old were you when you left Chile, Javier?
I think 22, if I'm not mistaken now.
And you
23, 22.
And you visit
after my BA. After my BA was
And you visit, I mean, regularly or almost. You're still connected to Chile.
To be honest, no. My mom is actually listening now. She's with us here, and I'm sure she's very upset that I don't really go as much as she would like to see me there. No, I don't go. It's, I mean, but I have to say that it was not always out of my own choice. As I mentioned before, for almost 4 years, I was not allowed to exit Ramallah, I mean, let alone Palestine. Or actually, I could have made a choice to exit my home in Palestine and never come back. And I decided to stay until making sure that I would not be uprooted from my homeland, which is Palestine. And that's why I decided to stay. But I visited Chile, I think a couple of months ago. Many things change, but it was nice to see my family.
So actually, we have Joe Ross, who's a good friend of ours. He says, Javier, I was with you last month in Santiago, Chile, at the Christian Zionism conference. What were some of your impressions of that time? What do you see as some of the similarities that Palestinians and Latin Americans experience relating to Christian Zionism?
Oh, that's...
Maybe you could tell us a little bit more for some people who are not aware about the conference on Christian Zionism.
Well, first of all, thank you, Joe, for this, for your comment and for having attended the conference in Santiago. It was a conference on Christian Zionism in Latin America, and we had a group of people from Palestine that attended the conference, presenting, of course, our position and what we see, what we witness, which is nothing positive coming out from Christian Zionism. In my case, I was asked to present the Kairos document and the perspective of the Kairos document on apartheid, or the apartheid dossier of the Kairos document, which I think it's an important contribution because it provides a theological perspective to understand the realities on the ground that now now at a moment where there is a consensus among the human rights community worldwide, from Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, to B'Tselem, Al-Haq, and others, to refer to the policies of the Israeli colonial settlement occupation as apartheid. So I think it was important to exchange perspectives. I think it was important to meet new people. It was a bit scary that they were all very friendly. I was prepared actually to debate a little bit more, but I think it's important to know that we have good friends, and I think it was important to learn from each other. So it was definitely a very good experience.
And who also joined from Palestine?
It was Reverend Mitr Raheb was with us. Actually, he organized the whole thing. We have Dr. Nadra Shalhoub from that. Usually, she teaches at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. She's a Palestinian Armenian. Actually, she's a Palestinian Christian from the Galilee, married to a Palestinian Armenian. We had Tony Daik, who's a very good friend, who's now suffering from the crimes that we commit. You know, we fall in love with, we get married, but if we fall in love with the wrong person, according to Israel, we cannot live in our country. So our poor Tony, who's one of the most brilliant young theologians you will find in Palestine, we could meet him in Chile, but he's not coming here because his wife is Bolivian and the Israeli occupation would not let them be here. So I think well, Dr. Faisal Aranki was also as well there. He's a member of the PLO executive committee. He's from Birzeit. No, it was an interesting experience to talk about Christian Zionism, also in a different perspective, not just from what we see in Palestine.
Xavier, can you tell us a little bit more about, I mean, that's not really the topic for today, but people are very much interested. Could you tell us about the Palestinian Christian community in Chile today?
I don't see any questions in Palestinian Christian community in Chile. You came out with it.
No, Javier, it's you get the simple to the chat.
No, I saw one. Well, there is a moment over 100 years ago where there was a movement of immigration from east to west. I don't really understand why people went to Chile, but I think the most logical explanation I would find is that they were moving to America. They didn't know the difference between North America and South America. Chile was a place with a very small population compared to the size of their territory. Where they first settled was weather very close to where they came from, which is mainly the Bethlehem area and moving where we are, Jerusalem a bit, Ramallah a bit. But also, I think there is another book that came out a couple of months ago. Nadim Bawals, I think, is the name of the author. A young, bright Palestinian Christian, also from Jordan, who actually researched, and he came out with big proofs that those who actually denied the return of those first immigrants to Palestine were not actually the Zionists, were the Brits. Now, people that had immigrated before 1922, they were basically considered to be citizens of an enemy state, the Ottoman Empire, and they were prevented after making some money in Chile and other places in Latin America to return from Palestine, from Chile to Palestine. I think that's important because I've heard a few British officials talking about how concerned they are about Christians in the Holy Land, and I think they could just start with an apology, and then we could talk about anything else.
And does the Palestinian Christian community in Chile play a role to influence politics there or even in Latin America?
It's a very strong community. I mean, they identify as the Palestinian community, not as a Palestinian Christian community, even though the vast majority of them are Christians, mainly from Bethlehem, Bet Jal, and Bet Sahur. But not all of them are Christians, but it's a vast majority. I think religion, the impression I get, I'm not an expert on Chile or Latin America, I don't claim to be so, but the impression I got last time I was there is that the role of religious institutions. It's way less in society than what I used to experience there 12 or 13 years ago. Now, they play a very important role. I don't know if you saw that they hosted the Chilean president, Mr. Boric, last week to light the Christmas tree at the Palestinian Club, where he announced that Chile was actually going to upgrade their office of representation to Palestine, to an embassy in Palestine, which I think it's are the kind of steps that some people may not see as useful, but as some others may refer to are the irreversible political facts that you may be presenting, especially in light of the new Israeli government, that it's close to become a reality, that it's a government of people truly committed with annexation. I think what the Chilean government did, or what the Chilean president announced, it's a very significant step that shows a pattern that hopefully other Latin American countries are going to follow.
So Javier, to go back to the book, because many people are interested, and so am
Shukran.
I.
Shukran.
I want to ask you, so in your book, because some people were asking to summarize a little bit, you're shedding light on active or influential Palestinian Christians who played a very important role in the national movement. How many, do you remember how many personalities do you focus on?
That's a very good question. No, I did not make the list, mainly because I did not want to do an encyclopedia. Even though some of the people that actually read the book told me that it looks like an encyclopedia of Palestinian Christians, but it was not my idea. There is by the way, there is a group of people that they did something like an encyclopedia on Palestinian Christians, but it's in Arabic. They were working for a few years on this. They're in Bethlehem. Unfortunately, I don't remember now the name of the initiative. But you find many names. I mean, if you go to the index, it's full of names. Some of them are known. I mean, you can go from George Habash and Edward Said and Hanan Ashrawi to others like the one I mentioned, that I'm really interested in digging more into his history. You know, Bishop Elia Khoury, for me, it's perhaps the most impressive discovery I had from this book. And others that were more kind of anonymous. There were some people I interviewed, for example, that were involved in armed resistance against Israeli occupation. Of course, I could not quote them by name in some cases, or I decided actually in some cases just not to mention names for whatever may happen. I decided in some other cases I mentioned mainly because the people that were involved are no longer with us. But still, I think you find hundreds of names easily in this book.
And how many names do you? I mean, it is your hunch is that if you've mentioned hundreds of names, how many hundreds have you missed?
I think I've missed thousands, if not hundreds of thousands. And I think I want to explain myself well. Now, someone here, Ryan, I think he shared an article I wrote for This Week in Palestine on myself with my grandfather. And I write about my grandfather as someone who was extremely simple, very humble. He was a stone cutter. So I hear from some of my friends now about the villas they used to have in West Jerusalem, in Talbi and Qatamon. And I tell them, well, my grandfather used to build those villas, right? And I think my grandfather, being extremely simple, extremely humble, he managed to keep our cultural heritage, to keep our identity without even talking politics. And I consider my grandfather a hero. That's why I wrote what I wrote. And I think wherever our people went, and they kept our identity alive, I think they are all heroes. I mean, not any people could go through what we've been going through. The Nakba was an attempt at eliminating our presence. We've moved from a situation whereby our very existence has been denied, from the land without a people for a people without a land, to the Trump plan, quote unquote, deal of the century. I mean, what could this map, if anyone is familiar to the map of the Trump deal, mean, but trying to further fragment and perpetuate the denial of our rights? So I think when you're in Palestine, and I assume that many of you have been in Palestine, you find many anonymous heroes, and I think they all deserve to be mentioned. That's why, for example, the cover of the book actually shows it's a combination of drawing, but also a picture. And this picture are, I think, 4 or 5 Palestinian ladies demonstrating in Bet Sahur during the first Intifada after Sunday Mass with a few children carrying a banner saying that the PLO is a representative, which at that time they could have gone to jail for doing this. So yeah, I think there are so many people that were not mentioned, and I hope that others are going to continue doing this. By the way, Omar, that's the last thing I want to say on this question. My book is not the first book published this year on Palestinian Christians. It's true that I perhaps I'm the only one who took the case as such. But we have a very good book on Palestinian Armenians by Dr. Versen Agavakian, which is also a very important component of our people. I mentioned a few things about Palestinian Armenians, like the 40 martyrs they gave to Palestine under the bombardments of the Haganah in 1948 while they were defending, and very few people actually remember this, that Palestinian Armenians defended the Jaffa Gate. And some historians may actually say that if it wasn't for the Armenian resistance in Jaffa Gate, we could have lost the old city back in 1948. From this to the book of Dr. Shawki Harb, for example, which was presented last week in Ramallah, there is a very beautiful book that got me to tears, actually, by Nadine Sayegh about her father, Nicholas Sayegh, in Jaffa, Oranges from Jaffa, it's called. It's a beautiful novel based on true events. So this year, I think we've had a number of books written about Palestinian Christians, whether mentioning explicitly, as in my book, or by novels and others, that I don't think we have for a long time. And I think what's more important is that we Palestinians, we are telling our story. We are not allowing others to come and draw this. And I said something that I mentioned in the presentation of the book Jerusalem. I think there is one quote unquote expert, I don't know her, on Palestinian Christians. She's always quoted in several academic papers, whatever, from the Hebrew University. To be honest with you, I didn't even quote her. I didn't need to, right? Because I had the sources from our own people. I did not have to go to an Israeli to ask about my people, even though I would love them to open the archives and to show what they did in 1948 to our people. But other than that, I did not have to ask them for anything. It was our people, and this book basically represents a story that is being narrated with the voices of those who made history, and that I was lucky enough in many cases to interview.
I mean, it's sometimes when people just watch the news about, just to follow up, when we talk about Palestinian Christians or Christians of the Holy Land, you find that it seems that there's a battle that is happening in the media who has ownership over them. Israel is pushing so much money into into promoting that Palestinian Christians are the happiest Christians in the Middle East, and they're proud to be connected to Israel. You find also like it's with the PA, even it is sometimes when it happens with the Hamas media machine, they're speaking about how Christians are happy in Gaza. Why? I mean, somebody focuses so much, everyone's focusing on that. As a person who's been part of diplomats and so on, why are we so special?
Because we are the Christians of the land of Jesus. I mean, and I think this connection is something that we should not forget. I remember once I was at church, and the choir started singing an anthem that translated would be something like, "O daughter of our land." I mean, which other people could refer to Virgin Mary as "O daughter of our land," right? We. And we are extremely proud to refer to and to remind people that Jesus was born in Palestine. We are very proud to, I mean, I remember one of the active members of Sabil, Nora Karmi, that once interviewed by, I think, a French journalist, saying like, "So when did you become a Christian?" And she answered, "Well, since Pentecost," right? That's a pride we have as Palestinian Christians, and it's a voice that definitely the Israeli occupation has been trying to extinguish. Why? Because it doesn't serve their interest. Unfortunately, in the West now, it serves some other interests, which is very Islamophobic, I have to say. You know, a month ago, I had a few meetings in Paris. I asked to meet with members of parliament that were in a group called the Friends of the Christians of the Middle East. They cared about every single Christian but Palestinian Christians, and they considered themselves to be the best friends of Israel in parliament. I told them, well, you know what? You are contributing to the opposite of what your goal is supposed to be. So in other words, I think, going back to the book, I think the book presents, I mean, you know, Omar, I mean, I hate talking about myself, and I'm very bad at self-promotion, but let's promote the book a bit. I think what the book shows is a very organic history. It's a combination of different stories that some people may not have heard about, but that show, once again, I like using that term, organic. This is how our presence is in Palestine. So no matter how many checkpoints they will put here, no matter how many walls they will put here, no matter how many tourists they will bring and say that they are bringing and allowing Christians to pray in the Holy Land, our hearts and our minds will remain with the people that were not allowed to come here, whether from Jordan, whether from Lebanon, because we are just one single people. And as Reverend Munder Ishaq said during Christmas Day, we remain one, not just as Palestinians, but also in Jesus. And we shall trust this until the moment we all meet together in Palestine, and hopefully sooner than later.
Do you think sometimes dividing, I mean, just saying, here's the Palestinian Christian participation in the national movement, rather than just speaking the story of all Palestinians in the national movement? In Arafat Museum, there's a painting, a mural on the wall that shows like all of like Palestinian figures, has Muslims, who's on it, people from different backgrounds, just all together, and they are the Palestinian story. Do you think that some people might misunderstand you by focusing only on Palestinian Christians in the national movement?
If they read the book, they won't. And I think the book is clear on that. Now, if you go to the Arafat Museum, don't just look at that painting. When you start moving around, you will see for me, one of the most beautiful pictures you will find there is Yasser Arafat in 1988 in the UN in Geneva, delivering a very important press conference. By his right was an Episcopal bishop, Elia Khoury, that I repeated a couple of times here. He was not there representing Christians, even though what I mentioned in the book, that I think President Arafat wanted to give, you know, a visual impression, right, which was very strong, right, of having a bishop sitting by his side as a Palestinian member of the PLO Executive Committee. But this role of Palestinian Christians in the national movement was extremely emphasized by President Yasser Arafat. He was always extremely careful about including them. I think there was There were very few visits to Europe of President Arafat where he would not pass by the Pope. Remember that one of the saddest events of our history, the Sabra and Shatila massacre, when President Arafat knew about this massacre, he was actually in the Holy See or in Rome right after meeting Pope John Paul II for the first time. So it's really intertwined. I would say that there was no need for me to write this book. Let's put it this way to answer your question. As a Palestinian, I would say I don't need anyone to remind me of the contributions of Palestinian Christians. But given the situation worldwide and given how people have been speaking or trying to quote unquote give us a voice, we see, Brits, Greeks, whatever, saying that they represent Palestinian Christians. I think it's important sometimes to put things in order. And once again, my book is a very humble way of presenting the stories of others. I don't think, I am someone who try to create any new content. I just try to bring some justice to some people and help those who want to, that are interested about Christians in Palestine. But by no way I wanted to divide our people. That would be a big mistake.
I mean, usually I've had the impression that we Palestinians are not doing a good job preserving our history and our stories. And I mean, it's recognizing the people who played an important role. But you mentioned like there's like 3 or 4 books that were published this year that are attempts to document and to speak about our people and about our narrative. Is this new, or it's been, I mean, I just was misinformed?
No, I think there is an effort. And I think it started, I would say, with Sabil playing a very important role. And I mean, I think the first books that appear on Palestinian liberation theology, on efforts to counter Christian Zionism, came from where we are today. And then I think there is another important role being played by that are not, well, first Diyar, the Al-Kalima University in Bethlehem, that I think they are just promoting. To be honest with you, when I spoke to them about my book, it didn't take them much to accept to publish it. And I think that's a luxury that not many people actually have. But I would encourage, I mean, I think the book is an invitation for others to write. I receive very good comments and reviews about the book, and I'm very proud of this. But I think it's not complete. I mean, perhaps you will understand our Palestinian diplomatic history through Palestinian Christians between 1917 and 2004. You will understand a lot of elements that took place, inside, how you connect them throughout Palestinian history. But for example, I would love to have a book, not myself, I will not do that research, about the first Intifada, for example. I don't think we have, with the exception of the 18 Wanted, the short movie or movie that was made on Bet Sahur, I don't think we really have, a solid document explaining this fantastic way of resisting the Israeli occupation by making use of non-violent tools. I think that, again, I mean, you can have a book about every single church that was destroyed in 1948. Who talks about the Church of Bisan? Now, Reverend Naim Atik is with us. Who talks about the Church of Bisan? The churches of Bisan, actually, not just the Church of Bisan. Now, I asked in the Latin Patriarchate if they had the Sijilat, the archive of the church. I just wanted to see who was the last person who got married there, who was the last person who got baptized, when the last service took place. They don't have them, right? It would be amazing if someone could actually do that research.
Actually, Reverend Naim has the book. His father, when he left Bisan, he took the book with him. I think it's with Reverend Naim, this book.
So he stole it from the Latins? No.
No, from the Anglicans. Somebody else stole it from the Catholics. That's what I think. I mean, it's Reverend Naim is with us. ask him.
Reverend Naim, I will call Reverend Naim as soon as we finish from here. I will call somebody else and then I will call Reverend Naim.
So, so your book is available on Amazon, and is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. So it's I think it's a good book. It's a good resource for people to have. And if it's you trust the opinion of Sabil and the opinion of Omar, I think it's you can also leave a review on Amazon. Have you been getting bad reviews or good reviews, Javier?
To be honest, I didn't open the Amazon page. You know, I encourage people to go and buy the book from the educational bookstore in Jerusalem, whoever can be in Jerusalem. I was really sad to see that in Bethlehem, you know, where they were very upset at me for not launching the book there. I could not find the book in the libraries there, but in Ramallah it is available. And I'm really looking forward also for what we can do abroad with this book. I mean, I was asked to do a launching in Amman, which I would love to do as soon as possible. I was asked to, I think, Denmark would be the next. So yeah, but no, I didn't open it on Amazon, but I got very good comments from people who actually read the book, and I'm really encouraged by what they said.
I read some part. It's a good book. I think, Javier, you have done a great job. I mean, it is by attempting to start. I think there is need for much attention to document and to promote our narrative through different ways. So I mean, it's an excellent initiative, and I would encourage people to encourage the people who are doing the research and doing the amazing work. So please, if it's Ryan, if you could leave, or maybe he has already left the link on in the chat for people. Yes, if you'd like to review it, say a good word, promote it also to other friends, add it to your library, your collection. Please do. Javier.
You know, sorry, I think I would really like to apologize because I'm not experienced on webinars, and I'm just looking at all the messages that I'm getting here on the right. So apologies. I did not mean to ignore anyone.
Don't worry, I was following it, unless you got something that was personal, but that's not allowed actually. All the questions has to come through me. That's our security system at Sabil.
I don't know. I think I have a number of direct messages here, but
you see, yeah, that's the Kumi community. They don't listen to procedures. They just break the law. That's what they do. Sabil folks.
You know, I'll be extremely biased, so I will just speak with Auntie Samia Khouri wrote. I do not think we should expect any apology from the British.
Get it out of people are saying outside Amazon.
It's on Amazon. It's on Amazon.
But some people are boycotting Amazon. Can they get it outside Amazon?
Then they should come to Palestine and buy it here. I don't see any other option.
Or write to Sabil and we'll help you to send it to you by mail.
That's it. That's it. I made an offer to Sabil and they didn't accept it, but it's fine.
What was the offer?
That I will get. No, then I'll remind you of what I said.
What we can do is actually we do an exercise. We get a book and we mail each one a page, and then we do we try to collect it together online.
طيب خلاص. Okay, تمام. It's okay. But I would go back to what Auntie Samia Khouri wrote. I do not think we should expect any apology from the British. I fully agree with that. I don't expect an apology from the British, but I think we should still insist. They cannot really continue to act here as if they have nothing to do. They are not just any third party. The book, what shows actually is how negative, and I just want to use that term, just not to say catastrophic, was their role in Palestine for Palestinians in general and Palestinian Christians in particular. So the least we could expect from them is an apology. And they should start from there before coming out saying that they care about Christians in the Holy Land, and which, by the way, it's a term I don't really like. We are Palestinian Christians. I'm not a Christian from the Holy Land. That's something that I also wanted to say. There is a question on the novel from Jaffa.
But
It's
I think,
called,
Javier, we are running out of time, and we usually remain. I mean, it's.
okay, I'm sorry.
But I mean, we're gonna be sending the information and all of the links. Thank you all for being with us, and thank you, Javier, for being part of this. And congratulations on the new book. And I hope everyone here will get a chance to get the book and also get the time to read it.
Thank you, Omar, and thanks everyone that was here. Once again, I was extremely honored to be here, which is my organization. By the way, wherever I write in a CV, where I volunteer, it's always Sabil. So I'm extremely happy to be able to contribute to this very important initiative, and hopefully our friends abroad will be able to, which I'm sure they already do, to pick some of the messages in order to contribute to justice, which is the first thing we should demand for in order to make peace. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Javier. Thank you all, and God bless you. And we wish you a happy new year. Next year, next week. We're taking a break from Kumi. We will send you more information. Thank you for being committed just to come. I mean, it's so close to Christmas and holiday season. So God bless you. Take care of yourself. And till we meet again, keep the movement going. Take care, friends.
Thank you.